Welcome to the Top Order podcast. Stu, Jamie and Binksy with you here to review the England-India draw fest at Old Trafford. India fighting back to secure a draw. Ben Stokes and Joe Root perform again. Some controversy at the end of the game. Rishabh Pant in a moon boot. Was the pitch too flat? And changes for the fifth test. What's coming up at the Oval. We'll also talk a little bit of New Zealand, South Africa and Zimbabwe Tri-Series cricket. Matt Henry's awesome, and the Test series against Zimbabwe starts on Wednesday. All coming up on the Top Order podcast. Stay tuned. Well, boys, we are recording this on Monday evening UK time, I guess Tuesday morning for you in New Zealand, Stu. A day or so after that fourth test at Old Trafford. Kind of catching up, I guess, on the press and the media after that game in the course of the last 24 hours or so. Jamie, I don't know whether this is right, but apparently there hasn't been a result in the county championship at Old Trafford all year this year. Pitch is very, very flat. Apparently Lancashire start a county championship game this week. They're looking at just continuing on that pitch, just a bit, some new lines on there. That's a joke, by the way. I don't think they're going to do that, but they may well consider just carrying on that pitch. But look, we've got to talk about the test match, a test match where England elected, somewhat surprisingly, I think, given the historical statistics at Old Trafford. And I think if I dig this out correctly, there was a stat that came out early in that test match. I think the stat is that there hasn't been in 85 tests at Old Trafford dating back to 1884, no game has been won by the team choosing to bowl. So England chose to bowl with, I think my maths is correct, quite a lot of history in the bank there. And then got themselves in a position where that could have been a trend, but I guess some decent batting at the top of the order for India in their first innings. And I guess England, what was it, sort of 3 for 212, might have been thinking, we might have made a bit of an error here, but managed to bundle India out for 358. And then, did what I think a lot of England fans have been imploring them to do for a while now, is bat big and bat once in a test match and give themselves a chance of that sort of, I guess, slightly different way of winning things. Bowl the opposition out twice without actually having to go and chase the runs down. A fantastic and record-breaking 150, which I'm sure we'll come on to, which saw Joe Root go past some notable cricketing dignitaries. And then, some question marks about Ben Stokes' form, not least from one of the people on this podcast who I think was wanting him dropped a couple of test matches ago, Jamie. So we'll have a little talk about his 2 man-of-the-match performances in a row and see whether, that's still something that you'd be pondering for the 5th test. And then, look, obviously some heroics from, KL Rahul at the top of the order. I think we've got to give him some plaudits for the way that he's played throughout the series, and particularly find himself standing on his bat handle at 2 for 0 at the end of the first over. When he was joined by his skipper, Shubman Gill. And then, the 4 of the next 4 batsmen really combining to kind of play out, what turned into a pretty dull draw on the final afternoon of the game. But Stu, I think first, do you want to talk a little bit about India's performance in this? Because I know that's probably the thing that you've highlighted first on the run sheet from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think you summed it up well in that. I mean, I think England was on top for this whole game basically until that final day. It sort of was tracking towards an England victory, and even in that final innings, 2 down for 0, and you're thinking, okay, this is just a procession. Pant's injured. We don't know if he's going to come out to bat, even though he was incredibly brave to come out and do that. We'll probably talk about him to some degree. But, first Rahul, then Gill, that partnership, and then Jadeja and Washington Sundar. Once those 2 had gone, those 2 pile on the partnership and hang in there. And the person I probably want to highlight, we've sort of talked about all the other guys throughout the series, but I wouldn't mind highlighting Washington Sundar here. I think he deserves a lot of credit for the way he he seems to be just making himself a valuable player for India in this in Test cricket in this series. I mean, he started with the ball against New Zealand. He's chipped in with wickets and runs in this series at different points. He's now got 100 here, coming in at 5. On paper, to me, sometimes it seems like he's kind of, I don't know, India's third best spinner in their squad, maybe their seventh or eighth best batter in their squad, but he keeps getting himself in the team and then keeps making important contributions. I mean, I'm sure he's going to regret what he said on day 4 or wherever it was on the third test. But if they do go on and cruise to victory, like he said they would, then, he would have put in 2 huge performances now to have them leading 2-1 in this series. So, yeah, I think he's been very, very good. And, yeah, as you say, for India to be behind for the majority of the series, I don't think it'll feel like a win for them to have gone and drawn this series, but I think they'll feel pretty good about how they've come away from this game and going into the 5th test, with this game still live. I'd be keen to hear what you boys think, really, how you're feeling about that result. I mean, I just mentioned India. I think they'll feel very positive about what happened. But Jamie, maybe for you, I mean, like I said, even at 220 for 4 when Washington and things were in there, Washington and Jadeja were in there. Root drops that tough chance at slip off Jadeja on 0. Maybe he catches that and they win this game. How are you sort of feeling about the result? Is it a negative because now there's all these miles in the results or in the bowlers, or is there actually still a lot of positives to take away? Because England did a lot of good things in this game as well.
Yeah, no, great question. I was there for day two, and I think it was probably, well, an enthralling day's cricket. To kind of, that you got the best of both worlds. But I think on day two, it looked like England were miles ahead. Like they kind of managed to sort of go through the tail end, or the yeah, kind of middle order to tail end quite quickly on what we saying it was a really good deck. And then when Crawley and Duckett came out, they were just bossing it around, and actually Gill was kind of just chasing the ball, and he looked, they looked like a touring side that were ready to sort of go home. They'd had enough. They almost like battered into submission. So I think from that position there, where England, we went home thinking, okay, well, England could get 700 tomorrow and skittle India, and it could be game over, which I suppose was their intention. But I don't think we expected India to probably demonstrate the fight, not because they can't, but I don't think having watched them on day two, we thought they'd put in a performance like they did. Um, I mean, saying that as well, the pitch actually started to well, I'm not say break up, but there was some even bounce. It started to turn. It certainly wasn't easier to bat on, I don't think, in the fourth innings or third innings. And actually, India made a really good fist of that. I think what it does demonstrate from an England perspective, bowling wise, is while Stokes, and I would just like to get on record, I did suggest after a few sangrias in Spain and sitting in the sun that maybe he should be because of his injury record at the time and all of that. But I'm just like an idiot now saying that. So I think if you take Stokes out of it, magnificent five fair. The periphery just kind of looks a little bit lacking. Like Archer, good in aspects, great to have him back. But I think what you kind of see in that second innings is perhaps just not the ability to kind of push through on a flat deck. And I think, we'll talk about the pitch, I'm sure, but you do need something a little bit different, don't you? On a flat deck. And, I'm going to state the obvious, but flat decks are almost made for leg spinners because they can do something a little bit different. It just changes the angle. It changes your sort of psychology, I think, around the whole thing. And yeah, I think that's kind of a mixed bag for me. But hats off to India, phenomenal achievement. And like I said on day two, I didn't think they'd have that in them because they looked pretty beat. Bowlers were going off the pitch, with injuries and strains and this, that, and the other, and they looked pretty knackered. But yeah, fair play. Yeah, great result. So disappointed, I think, from an England point of view, given where we were at day two. Yeah.
The one thing and I'll keep this really, really brief. My kind of take, I guess, on this, Stu, is this test was like the reverse microcosm of the series in many ways. So I think, and look, I really, really would like if you've made it 10 minutes and 13 seconds into this podcast as a listener, please just listen to the words that I'm saying before you jump in the comments and talk about, some of the stuff that we will, inevitably talk about that's more controversial. India have bossed this series up until this test match. But England have won some of the big moments and the big sessions to put themselves in a position where at the moment they're 2-1 up with one test match to play. This game was the reverse of the previous three games in that England have dominated, bar probably the first session and a half. They have bossed this entire game and then come out obviously on the end of what I think that they will be disappointed. I don't think they'll be, I don't think they'll necessarily feel like a loss for them because at the end of the day, they've batted once. They've got 600 and whatever it was. They've got two players that have scored magnificent hundreds and they've, rolled India for 350 in the first innings of a test match. And I think what they'll be disappointed about, obviously, is they weren't able to get over the line in that second innings. But I don't think there's anybody, partial or impartial, that's seen any of this game that can't say that the thing that has killed it on the final day is that pitch. To Jamie's point, it looked as if it might start to play up a little bit, but realistically, it did almost nothing on that, fifth day. There was the odd one that, really misbehaved. Shubman Gill got hit on the fingers a couple of times. There was as Marnus Labuschagne would say, a couple of lowies. But other than that, there wasn't an awful lot wrong with certainly the unwalked upon parts of that pitch. Yes, there was maybe a bit in the footmarks, but on the bit that the players aren't allowed to transgress onto throughout the course of the test match, it was still like the M6 motorway by the end of the game. And it was like the M6 motorway with a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit as well, because there was just absolutely no real zip or pace at all for spin or seam to get anything out of. And that's probably why both sides to a large extent. Rishabh Pant's injury is slightly different, but if you now look at the niggles that exist in those camps, we've got Akash Deep struggling, we've got Chris Woke struggling, Ben Stokes struggling, Jofra Ark, so the list goes on and on. We've got some seamers that are going to be very, very weary. Mohammad Siraj, I think, has done something to an ankle. So, it's like an episode of MASH at the moment. That sort of corridor in the hotels of those two teams. So, for me, we come on to that question. And Stu, really interested to get your thoughts because you've probably caught up with the highlights and whatnot and probably not been able to see quite as much as those in the Northern Hemisphere. But, your thoughts, because it seems to be just, me and Baldy that whinge about pitches quite a lot.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts in terms of being a bowler. I'm always hopeful that there's a bit more in pitches. And I don't know. I mean, obviously, apart from the Lords, the final innings at Lords, I feel like the pitches in general throughout the series have been pretty nice to bat on. And I mean, even I didn't think that Lords wicket was a pitch where you would crumble to be all out for 150, and both sides struggled in their final innings in that game. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would have thought this is England's plan to make these pitches pretty nice to bat on, and that's maybe why Stokes, was he trying to bat? I would have thought his plan is usually to try and chase down, bat first. I know you guys have talked about how you'd like to see them try and do something different, try and enforce the follow on or try and bat once, back big. But it seems to me that with the way the pitches are, that you back yourself to chase anything down is kind of been the tactics. I don't know. I mean, throwing it back to you, Jamie. I mean, yeah, I just it just doesn't make for great cricket when it's flat and there's nothing in it for the bowlers, in my opinion. But to your point, Jamie, I don't think either side necessarily has picked the bowlers, particularly India. I don't think have picked the bowlers to try and really say we're going to go all out for here and try and take 20 wickets, which I think is why you see situations like this.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think, we haven't also as well, with injuries have probably robbed teams of having somebody that can reverse the ball as well. And, so reverse swing hasn't really come in, albeit Archer started to get it to duck away to the left-handers a little bit. But even that, even on a hard deck, the outfield at Lancashire is still extremely lush. So it's not really doing, helping in terms of the reverse stuff. So, yeah, it's all right. You're going to get five. If I was being cynical, the there's people in each of these test grounds that want the test to go 5 days, so they've got 5 days of catering and hospitality and beer sales and ticket sales. That because it feels a bit like that. It's like, okay, we don't want a test match to be over in 2.5 days equally, but we don't want it to go to day 5 and it still be kind of like it is on day 1 because. Like, where's the fun and enjoyment really in that? You kind of it feels a bit clinical. It feels a bit sterile, and I think yeah, India, as we've discussed, have probably not in our mind picked their best bowling attack, but notwithstanding, these questions have perhaps got to be asked about some of these pitches. I know it's been extremely dry in England this year, so I mean, does that explain it? But maybe. I think we'd spoken before the series that, results at Lords had perhaps been quite hard to come by as well, and how perhaps too paced at times Lords had been, in the county championship. So maybe it's just a general issue, the dryness has caused this effect on some of the wickets. But yeah, and to Binksy's point, you can understand why why a lot of the injuries are strain muscular related. It's all probably impact, them doing the hard yards, putting hitting these hard wickets with a lot of force, and hence we're seeing casualties. So yeah, I'd like to see a little bit more, but I don't. You go to the other end and you have a 3 day test match, and probably nobody wants that either. So it's hard, isn't it? It's probably I wouldn't want to be a groundsman. It's hard to get that balance right, um, but yeah, maybe some selection issues for both teams, not being able to pick their best attacks or not picking their best attacks, perhaps in India's case.
Yeah, and I think, Stu, you mentioned Kuldeep Yadav. I don't even think that would have made a massive difference. I mean, I think it would have made a difference if you kind of think about what the selection what ifs. I think Anshul Kamboj has had probably a Test match debut to forget. Really surprised that he got the new ball ahead of Mohammad Siraj in that England first innings. So I think even if he'd have got on, it would have been slow turn, and it seemed quite easy to play the spinners during the course of this Test match. And yeah, look, to Jamie's point, I think there's a combination of factors there. We were talking, I think, off air about the pitches at Old Trafford this year. I've actually just got the stats up. This is the 5th first-class game there, I think, this year. There hasn't been a result yet in a first-class game of cricket at Old Trafford this year. And then I think we saw a little bit less of it in this game in terms of the ball going soft and players trying to change it every 14 minutes. But I think that will still have been a factor. I wonder whether the players have just been told, we aren't going to change the ball too often, guys, so can you please stop asking? It's not helping your over rate. Or whether this was just a slightly better box of balls for this Test match, either deliberately because they've tried to do some form of testing on them, or they've gone to the manufacturer and said, can we have something a little bit different? We don't know that, but I think the combination of the pitches, the Duke's ball going a bit soft, as Jamie said, the lushness of the outfields. I don't know whether that's been a deliberate ploy that they don't want it to reverse too much because Bumrah, Siraj might be dangerous with it reversing. So let's negate that, and we back our guys with the new ball in Wokes and Archer and Stokes to find something out of a ball that you'd throw to your dog. So we don't know the answer to those questions, but I think it's something that as the ECB have potentially got to have a little bit of a look at, because it seems as if the team aren't getting the pitches that they want and the public aren't getting the pitches that they deserve. So there's got to be a middle ground somewhere, I think, but for the brilliance of the two teams to extract what they can and what they have from some of these wickets over the course of the summer, we might have been looking at almost like a 1980s, 1990s English summer where you see 2 or 3 draws and a series won 1-0, which nobody would want, I don't think.
I guess there could be an argument to say that, it is Test cricket and it is up to the brilliance of individuals and teams to find what is there on these decks. No one wants to see a green seamer where, the opposition are 16 for 4. Like, as I remember Headingley, in some of the early 90s series against the West Indies, we rattled them out and you kind of think, okay, the conditions were super friendly. So it's trying to find that balance, isn't it? Where you don't want it to be benign and nothing really happening, but equally you don't want it so in favour of maybe the bowlers or the spinners that actually it just becomes, a non-event. So it's not an enviable job, I don't think, being a groundsman or a curator to get kind of the perfect pitch. But these certainly feel as though they've been left in the oven a little bit too long, I think.
Can you guys have mentioned the brilliance of individuals? We've kind of, me and Binksy did the Joe Root is amazing. He's on track to be the leading Test run scorer conversation last week. I mean, he scored another 100. I think you could probably just roll out what we said last week and repeat it all again. He's absolutely brilliant.
Can I just add something on Joe Root though? Because and you may have mentioned this, and I don't know if this is a common perspective, but I don't think we shout loud enough about Joe Root from a typically English perspective. Like I don't think we make enough noise about how brilliant he is. I think we do almost accept that every time he goes out to bat, he will score runs, and I don't think we really appreciate how difficult to be that consistent is at any sport. It doesn't matter what it is. And also the way in which he is 34, nearly 35 years of age. He can play all brands of cricket. He can play all around the wicket against the very best players in the world. And I just don't, I think it's a very typical British thing not to blow smoke up people's backsides too much. It's almost, or we want to wait for him to fail and then we'll destroy him, as perhaps we did when he was England captain. So there's a bit of a cry for me, really, that maybe as Englishmen, we're English people, we need to kind of make a little bit more about, Sir Joe Root, because he is going to be an icon, and he is an icon, and I think we should really laud him more than what we do, because he's not in the public domain. He keeps himself squeaky clean in that sense, but I think we should make more of him, because I don't think I've seen a better English. I thought KP was amazing, but he was very, very different. This guy's a different level, and I think he will overtake Tendulkar. He won't do the hundreds, but I think he will overtake him if he stays fit and if he carries the hunger. But that's just I wanted to say that because I don't know what you think. I don't know if you agree or whether it's just I don't read enough or hear enough, to pick up on that.
Yeah, Jamie, I was going to tell a lie then. I was going to say I'm going to steer away from the Root versus Tendulkar debate. I'm probably not. Joe Root, as you say, really unassuming. He could walk down Oxford Street, and I don't think a lot of people would recognise him. He isn't. And look, that's not because he's not famous. That's not because people wouldn't, appreciate him from a cricketing fraternity. But he's not sort of transcended sport in the way that someone like KP did. KP had headlines for other reasons as well. He was on the front pages as well as the back pages. Joe Root's never been on the front pages, and that's a good thing in my view.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I think when you then look at what he's done, and there's a little bit of synergy with Jimmy Anderson here as well. When you kind of look at early part of their career versus latter part of their career, and when you listen to the way that he talks about what he's done over the past 2 or 3 years, and particularly since COVID, he's, wanted to get better, and he's been methodical and ruthless in the way that he's gone away and tried to study. And he did a brilliant piece on the Sky Pod with Ian Ward and Nasser Hussain, and I think maybe Ponting, talking about how he's gone away and looked at, how he's got out, what stages of his innings he's got out, what he was trying to do at that particular point in time, and how he could shift his mindset to make sure that he had a better risk-reward ratio. So, where can I take risks, and what's the output of those risks in terms of runs, and where might I change that? And he's been that methodical in the way that he's gone about breaking down the way that he's batted over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. And since COVID, he's got 22 hundreds. So,
Mad.
And then let's just put that into perspective. COVID was what, 2020? So we're talking about since COVID, give or take 5 years. He made his debut in 2013. So there were 7 years before that. And he's reeled off, additional 500s in, comparing to the same sort of time frame before that. So Jamie, I think if you kind of look at the math, he might be somewhere about 50 hundreds if he can continue to play up to the 200 tests that then Tendulkar played, and then I think we do have a genuine conversation about and look, these are always subjective conversations. We're never ever going to answer them, but we can argue Joe Root hasn't scored particularly well in Australia. Put it in perspective, he averages 35 there. If he goes there for this Ashes and scores a couple of hundreds, all of a sudden he's averaging maybe 42, 43 there. It doesn't look quite so bad. And then you look at all those other sort of statistics, that they're averaging a similar amount in England, which is often talked about as a difficult place to bat for foreign players particularly. And then you look at his Joe Root's average in Asia. It is pretty good. It's up at around sort of 49 or thereabouts. So you're then going to start to be able to have some of those conversations. And at the minute, Tendulkar pips him on a number of those, with the exception of strike rate. But let's see how that sort of 2 and a bit years plays out. But I couldn't help looking at those stats as he went past Dravid and he went past Ricky Ponting and he went past Jack Callis. And you kind of look at going past Jack Callis, but you've then got to add Brett Lee to Jack Callis to get somewhere near where he is as a player with his 290 odd test wickets or whatever. So Joe Root's got a ways to go to catch Callis, and he might need a bit of work on his back if he's going to bowl some 90 mile an hour rockets at some point. But his thirst for runs looks at the moment unquenched, and that's a really, really good thing as an Englishman to see. But Stu, where do you see him on this pantheon? We've obviously talked about this big four of Kohli, Smith, and Throg in the throat. We've talked about this big four for such a while with Williamson in there as well. Where do you see him? Relatively objectively when you've got to consider Kane in there as well.
I find it really hard to compare him and Kane actually, because they just play Root just plays so many more tests, and I there's obviously the argument to say if Kane played more tests, then he would do the same as Root, do better than Root, but it's actually playing that many tests means you've got to perform that many more times as well. And so, Root's a brilliant player. I think at the moment, Steve Smith is as much as he's not my favourite on the eye in terms of how he goes about his runs, he's been brilliant as well. Kohli was obviously a fantastic player, struggled in the last few years. I mean, they're all fantastic. I do think Root, as you guys have said, Root deserves an enormous amount of credit for the way he's been able to just keep piling on these runs, and this level of when we did when Baldy did his top 100, he would often talk about peaks, right? How the span of years where they're at their best, and Root just keeps extending his. He just keeps making it longer and longer of a span of, I don't know what he averages since COVID, but obviously he's just been rattling off those hundreds.
It's in the 60s somewhere, I think, Jamie. Stu,
yeah. 60. I mean, and Baldy would talk about those historical peaks and say this guy averaged 60 for 3 years and he scored this many hundreds. Roots just keeps going and going. I mean, I don't know. Again, you'd have to talk about what pitches are, but he is, aside from Australia, he is doing it all around the world. And in that span, they've been there once, I think, have they? So, he's got his opportunity. If you're going to talk about legacies and things, it's a big series for him to go over to that Ashes and I guess, show what he can do in that environment. So, we could talk about how good he is for for a long, long time. That before
Sorry,
before
Stu,
we
I hijacked you, didn't I? So I took you off. So I'll give you the mic again. Sorry,
it
mate.
it's totally fine. And I mean, yeah, look, he deserves all the credit. I was when we were highlighting the English players. Stokes was the one that I was going to highlight though because he gets a fifer for the first time in 8 years, first 100 in a couple of years, and it's the bowling that's been really interesting to me, particularly in this series because I think hands down he's been the best English bowler in this series. He seems to be able to extract movement and wicket taking deliveries where other people just haven't been able to. And I'm fascinated from your point of view. Maybe I'll start with you, Binksy, because Jamie kind of alluded to it in some of the early conversation that he had around this test. But I mean, it's got to be fantastic to see Stokes bowl this much and bowl this well, but is it also kind of a concern that he's that like I think he's been streets ahead of all the other English bowlers, maybe with aside from Archer, who I think has had his moments, Cass has had his moments, but yeah, I think Stokes has just been so far ahead of those other English bowlers.
Yeah, I don't necessarily. Yeah, I don't necessarily agree that he's been, so far ahead of all of those other English bowlers. What I think we've seen, and I'll get a little bit nerdy on it, is they've done quite a lot of analysis on his action over the course of this series and comparing it with various other points in his career and going back to probably when he was at his most effective with the ball. And I think, as fast bowlers, and look, I don't claim to be a technical expert on this, but by any stretch of the imagination. But I think if we kind of look at one of the sort of things that you need to do to bowl quick is have this braced front knee, so that you can kind of catapult over the top of that front knee. And it looked as if, due to the injuries that he was carrying for, a couple of years and sort of getting through, managing his body through that pain, he was collapsing that front knee for a couple of years, and he's now got that snap back, and I think that's given him that difference in pace. And look, it doesn't really matter what it is in terms of miles per hour, but it just seems to have given him that extra one or two that seems to make the difference. And then I think the other thing that you highlight is the release points that he has on the crease. He comes from a lot wider. He brings the stumps into play. He swings the ball both ways and can do that relatively late. But I think the biggest thing is he continues to lead by example within that attack. And when there is difficult work to be done, he wants to go and do it. But I think a big part of that is that's the way he's captained all the way through. When he wanted the guys to go out there and play carefree, from a batting perspective, he was the one that went off and charged the first ball or reversed the first ball or came down the wicket. And he set that tone, and then he's kind of, he's actually regressed from that. Now that we're playing this slightly more Bazball with brains, to borrow, a phrase that's going around. So I wonder whether or not part of this, I'm going to go and show you how to do this. He's building up to the end of this series, but it's also then building into what he's going to want from those big fast bowling stocks in Australia, where undoubtedly we're going to be in some positions throughout the course of that series where he wants people to run through a brick wall and he can't do it. But he'll have already sort of, shown the way in how to do that. So concerned, yeah, because he could snap at any point, but, so could Bumrah and so could Stark and so could Hazelwood, and all of these guys, because they put, so much through their bodies in terms of loads that, that is going to be part and parcel of the game. Would it be, devastating if he's not on that plane come November because he's, pinged a hamstring or, done a knee or a shoulder or an intercostal or whatever? Absolutely. But I don't think you're going to see him wrap himself in cotton wool to sort of insure against that. He's just going to, hope and will. And as he said to Jonathan Agnew after the day's play, he said, pain is just an emotion. And look, I was trying to tell myself that on Sunday morning, having kept wicket for 55 overs. But yeah, I can tell you that the pain in my quads and groin was certainly more than an emotion come Sunday morning, but not for Ben Stokes.
I've been just on the Stokes bowling position. I've been massively surprised because I thought his days of contributing like he has done were done. With the injuries that he'd been through, and and kind of, his physical condition over the last sort of 12 to 16 months, 12 to 18 months. So I think I've just been blown away with how he has contributed. The longevity piece around him is always a worry, most definitely. I've also been massively impressed as well with his batting, because he seems to have. He's almost got, and I think on here we spoke about baseball for grown-ups. That this seems like version 2.0, and where a few years ago we were having him charge the first ball he was out there and play some ridiculous shots, and we all criticised him probably for that. But now the method in the madness looks very, very clear. Of course, as a leader, if you don't embody the philosophy that you're trying to impart on the whole team, then you're a charlatan. You're not being true to it. So really what he was doing was laying down the marker that it doesn't matter when it is, I'm really committed to this approach, so I'm going to do it. Once he's got everybody bought into it, then you can start to refine your methodology. And I thought his 100 the other day was more calculated. It was still aggressive, it was still assertive, but it wasn't as, it's almost like he didn't need to make the point to his teammates anymore about recklessness or being super assertive. It's like that message is there. They've got it. They understand it. Now we can work on version 2.0. So I thought that was the most like revealing thing for me, was just kind of the level of, I'm not going to say maturity, because he's a very mature and astute individual, but just the cleverness of the plan. And we all sort of fell for it a few years ago. Again, this is mad. Like, what is he doing? But now you look back and you go, okay, I get it now. It makes sense. But saying that, if we go and get thumped 5-0 by the Aussies, it won't mean anything. So that's the tenuous nature of sport, isn't it? But at the moment, it's a good story. It's a good historical lens to look back on the last few years of English cricket.
Stu, let's come on to some more bravery, I guess, in a different sense during the course of this Test match. Rishabh Pant. I've got to admit, at first when he got hit on the foot, I thought, oh, he's just trying to get out of keeping here. This is another impact injury that's going to allow him to, gives the gloves away to Jarrell again. But obviously very quickly took the boot off. There was a big egg on that foot. I think he even broke the skin by the looks of it. Looked like drawn a bit of blood as well. And then obviously he was taken off on a golf buggy. And I don't know whether they've actually said what the actual injury is. Initially, I think there was confirmation that it was broken, but then the commentators seemed to be sort of rolling that back throughout the course of the Test match. But obviously he didn't play any further part with the keeping gloves, but did come back out to bat almost on one leg. Just a word about him and some of the other performances from the Indian team through the course of this Test match from you, Stu.
I did enjoy waking up in the morning and seeing your conversation with yourself on our channel there about that punt injury. But look, I think I've seen everything I read keeps saying fractured foot, but I don't know. They have been a little bit coy about exactly what it is, but it sounds like definitely out of the fifth test. He was clearly struggling, and look, as you say, I mean, I think he would have been, to go off like that. You're well within your rights, obviously, to just be done for the Test match. But he comes out the next day, gets a huge round of applause. To be fair, everyone in that ground, full credit to the way they responded to him coming out, but added a few more valuable runs and really, really impressive stuff. I mean, lots of people have talked about him. You think Gambier made a special point to kind of shout him out and show, it's inspirational. There's no doubt about it for the rest of your side when someone's prepared to, you guys talked about tone setting for Ben Stokes, and I think that was really valuable. It's not where I expected you guys to go talking about that, but I really enjoyed listening to that, because I think you're spot on in the way that Stokes has kind of done that with the ball and with the bat at different times throughout his captaincy tenure. And I think this is an example of Rishabh Pant saying, look, we got to fight for this series. We are in a fight here, and he walked out there. Yeah, I mean, again, lots of people have talked about him in glowing terms over the past few days, and there's not a huge amount I can add to that other than to say, look, if you doubt, if anyone doubted his toughness after already coming back to play cricket again after a pretty horrendous injury, it sounds like, with the car crash, this was a fairly strong example that he's got plenty of ticker, and India are going to miss him. I mean, Dhruv Jurel will likely, I would expect, come in for this next test. I enjoy Jurel. I think he's a good player, but Pant's been excellent in this series, and that's going to be a big blow for India.
Yeah.
Do you, can I just pose a question? If either of you were England captain at that moment in time when he came out to bat, would you have done anything different from a bowler? It's a bit of a leading question. I thought they went slightly easy on him, if I'm honest. I think if that's Joe Root who walks out at Brisbane, I think Mitchell Starc is going in swinging Yorker, in swinging Yorker, in swinging Yorker. That's what I wondered, because we were all joking and going, right, if you've got the ball now, you're going for his foot, aren't you? Like, I don't know, or maybe that I just didn't. Yeah, or you're getting him to move around the crease, you're getting him to duck under the bouncer. Arguably, the pitch probably wasn't like that, but I just wondered if either of you were the captains, would you have targeted his foot, not to injure him, but because it's clearly a weakness, or I don't know, am I being am I being really nasty? I don't know.
Yeah, but Jamie, I watched the passage of play when he came back into bat, and I thought they did try and bowl the odd Yorker at him, and I thought they did try and make him run his singles. When the ball went out, that they made sure that they were making him run to the other end. So I thought they did a little bit of that. Could they have done more? Yeah, maybe. Put two fine legs and two third mans and just come in and bomb loads of Yorkers in. Yeah, maybe, but I thought they did a little bit of that. And look, I certainly wouldn't have had a problem if they'd have done more of that as well. I think, as you say, that's exactly what you would do. I think if you'd injured someone on the finger, you'd certainly be sticking a short leg in and a leg gully in and coming in and trying to bowl and bowl the ball into that area and put that person under a little bit of pressure. So I don't think there'd have been anything wrong if they'd have done that for me.
Nah, totally fine. We're going down controversy corner. Do you want to take us there, Binksy, and the final how the game wrapped up before we look ahead to the fifth?
Yeah, so look, I genuinely don't want to make too much of this because I think it's a very, very small part in a very, very big series and a very, very big game, a 5-day game that has ended with, probably 15, 20 minutes of quite farcical scenes if you're being brutally honest. And look, I think, I don't know what will happen, but I wonder whether with all the talk about overrates and all this kind of stuff, that this whole portion of the game needs to be looked at in terms of what we expect in terms of the amount of cricket that's played during the course of a test match and how the umpires are there to administer that rather than the players. So I think, this comes back to that broader debate. But yeah, certainly, look, we've had this debate off air. There's kind of no real argument, I don't suppose, for what India did. I'll just pose a couple of questions. And the relevant thing we're talking about here is playing conditions for the last hour, which essentially says if both captains, all the batters at the wicket, acting for their captain, accept there's no prospect of a victory for either side, they may agree to finish the match early. You often see it in first-class cricket. This is not a rare occurrence. When a game is dead, it often gets shelved. India obviously didn't want to do that because they felt they wanted to get a couple of milestones for a couple of players. Those players got those milestones against Joe Root and Harry Brook, serving up some steak and kidney pies. So when we kind of look at this in 20 years' time, 30 years' time, I don't think anyone's going to say, well, Ravi Jadeja got 12 test hundreds and one of them was, with Harry Brook bowling a bunch of pies. It will stand on his record. But yeah, I think when you've kind of got that absolutely gladiatorial contest, my view is, do you really need to see a couple of individual milestones that, in the grand scheme of things are pretty meaningless? I would say absolutely not. And I'd also kind of just pose the question that, part of Stokes's, argument was, well, I'm not going to be bowling my best bowlers here because, there is no chance of any result. If one of those two players had got injured for India, broken finger, whatever it might be, would Indian fans be looking on it differently and going, well, that was a silly risk for us to have taken for a personal milestone, and we want to go into a game with, our two spinners, and now we can't because one of them's got a broken digit. So there's a lot of what ifs in there. But for me, I just thought, do you know what? We've gone toe to toe for a period of time. We'll shake hands. But I know that you disagree, and many others will as well, and that's absolutely fine. But I do think we'll see this addressed by the ICC in terms of the way that these things should be administered by the umpires rather than allowing the players to do it. And, that goes to drinks breaks as well. When a player says, I'm having a drink, no, the umpire should be stepping in and saying, no, you're not, mate. I'll let you know when you can have one. I think that's my take on it. And I know you vehemently disagree, Stu.
Well, the one thing the one thing I'd just chip in with quickly is, of course, that in 25 years' time, when both those batsmen are talking to their grandkids, Harry Brook would have bowled at 99 mile an hour, and Joe Root would have been bowling leg spinners and deucers that turned, 8 foot. So it kind of would have been a very different way in which they scored their hundreds. But that's for the future, I guess. But yeah, Stu, you've got a very different perspective on this, haven't you? Yeah.
I mean, I think you guys are selling the value of those hundreds incredibly short by the fact that those guys were on 80 already by the time that those bowlers came on. And, I get how frustrating this would have been for England. I get that no one wants to see a game end like that. Indian fans don't want to see a game end like that with, Harry Brook bowling up lollipops either. And that's not really... I'm not going to argue for that we should have that just to give people milestones. But I think that, particularly in the case of Washington Sundar, he's not got a Test 100. And the value of what they did in this, what they did in that innings, that partnership, the value of how well they played to bat for another 15 minutes and get your 100. I mean, Washington Sundar is probably going, Shubman, you can't just declare on me now or finish this game on me now. We people talk about Vian Mulder, right? That 367, and he took a different approach to that. Personally, that was his call. But I think sometimes these milestones, they mean a lot to people. You've seen for everybody how important they are. As I said, I can totally see how England are frustrated. They've gone from two wickets for none to 400 for 4. The game is essentially over. They've got to get another game in 3 or 4 days' time. They don't want to bowl their bowlers. But I'm afraid if you don't get the wickets, you don't get to dictate how the game is played. And it's actually not like, I didn't really like the whole weird, trying to say, oh, you guys are doing it wrong by staying out here. It's actually, as you say, it's the captains have to agree. They wanted to stay out there. If you want to make it tough for them to score those 15 runs, then fair enough, make it tough. If you don't, then do what you did. Bowl them lollipops. They hit the runs. You walk off the field and you say, well played. So, I don't know. I enjoy the way England's...
And Stu, let's be fair, that's exactly what happened. But Ben Stokes didn't agree with Ravi Jadeja, who was probably deputising as the captain in that sense. Ravi Jadeja, as you pointed out in terms of the way that law is written, is completely within his rights to say, no, I don't agree. Ben Stokes is still equally right to say, no, I don't agree. And what I'm going to do is, in my opinion, I'm going to throw up some lollipops and devalue your 100. And I just want to, take one point that you mentioned. I don't think Jamie and I are devaluing those innings. I think I'm absolutely saying that 81 of those runs were absolutely fantastic. I'm saying that 19 of them probably weren't earned in the same way as 81. I might have got the numbers wrong. I'll also just throw out there that this is highly emotive and highly subjective. I remember Jack Russell scoring 28. The fact that he only got 28 in an 8-hour rearguard action with Michael Atherton in Johannesburg, If he'd have got 101 or 33, it wouldn't have mattered. That still goes down in folklore, English folklore, as a fantastic act of bravery and perseverance and doggedness as an England batsman. And that would have been the case for Shubman, for Ravindra Jadeja and Washington Sundar. That would have gone down as an absolute backs against the wall, fantastic knock. And I don't think whether it's 81 or 101 would have made any difference in the narrative around it. But yeah, it just kind of leaves, a little bit of edge going into this fifth test match, which is exactly what we want as fans for a series. We want a little bit of niggle. I'm sure we're going to have, the same kind of sledges if Washington actually gets picked, because there's a chance if they need to squeeze Kuldeep in, either him or Ravi Jadeja might be there to make way unless they play as specialist batsmen and drop maybe Sai Siddharthan out of the side for this fifth test match. But yeah, what do we think about those fifth test changes? And I think the caveat that we've got to say is it's a relatively quick turnaround for these oval test matches. So by the time you're tuning into this, England normally come out with their side as early as they possibly can. They've added Mr. Overton back to the squad again, I believe, to bolster those seeming stocks. And then, from an Indian perspective, it looks like we're not going to see Rishabh Pant. You find it hard to believe they're going to bring someone like Karen Nair back in. Mohammad Siraj looked as if he was struggling. Kambodge, I doubt we'll see him at the Oval, will we? I guess those real big question marks are around Jasprit Bumrah and what they do to bolster that bowling attack for India, and similar probably England. Only choices to make around the bowlers. I don't think they'll make any changes around the batting. Stu, might come to you first on the India stuff, and then Jamie, maybe take a stab at your England 11 for the Oval.
Yeah, look, as you said, I think it's all around the bowlers. I mean, Gautam Gambhir has come out and said that all the fast bowlers are fit again after Akashdeep and Ashdeep Singh were not fit for that last game. So it wouldn't surprise me if both of those guys play. I think actually that they should both play to come back into the side. As you said, I think Siraj probably looks like he needs a bit of a rest. I think he's been quite unlucky in this series. I thought he's bowled better than his stats are going to tell you, but he's had to shoulder a lot of the burden while they've been resting Jasprit Bumrah. I have no idea if Bumrah will play. I mean, Gambhir has left that open, but they said that they were going to play him 3 tests. He's now played 3 tests, so I don't know what that means. I still think, you have to just say, we're going to pick 7, maybe Washington Sundar is your 7th batter. He's your all-rounder. And you have to just pick your best 4 bowlers. They've got to win this test. You're going in, you're 2-1 down, you have to win. Can we just not... we just don't need to see Shardul Thakur again. I'm sorry. He scored a few runs in this game. I know Nitish Kumar Reddy's not there. I know you want to play an all-rounder. I know you kind of... that people are concerned that this Indian tail falls away, and it does. I understand that 100%, but I don't know. I just feel personally insulted that we've had to see Shardul Thakur bowl in these 2 tests, and we haven't seen Kuldeep Yadav. We haven't seen Ashdeep Singh. There are better bowlers, and India just needs to play them now if you want to go and try and win this test. I think it should be Akash. I think it should be Ashdeep. I think it should be Kuldeep, and I think Jasprit should play if he is fit. Otherwise, then you decide who your next best bowler is. But I think they should just be going all out with the bowling attack and trying to take 20 wickets in this game.
Yeah, I don't disagree, Stu. I think there's possibly another way that they might have to do it, and that might be that Jarrell either has to come in and keep wicket in place of Pant, and they don't get an extra batter in there as well, and they back him to essentially be like for like. I don't think he is, though. The other one that's slightly out of left field is KL Rahul could keep wicket. And you could then still keep Washington Sundar and Jadeja, which gives you a really long batting lineup. And then you can still get Kuldeep in and still play all the seamers that you want to play as well. So I don't necessarily think they'll do that. But I think for a one-off test match, I wonder whether they've got to have some of those conversations around, can we do this for for one game and a must-win game if they want to level the series. Jamie, for England, where do you see, where do you think the conversations are happening in the corridors of, whatever hotel these guys are staying at now in West London?
Yeah, I mean, to quote you from our preamble, I think Stokes plays. Whether he bowls is probably TBC, but I think he definitely plays, and therefore I think if that happens, maybe then Overton comes in. And I'm thinking for who? Well, it's either rotation of the other bowlers, or do you not go with a frontline spinner because it's the Oval, and I don't know. I should have looked before what results have been like, but what I can recall is that Surrey have scored a shed load of runs at the Oval in the County Championship this season. So I think it's fairly good to bat on. I think it's always been your traditional good pace will go through. So I wonder whether, like Wokes has played quite a lot, Cast has played quite a lot, Archer's obviously done back to back. Will this be a test match that's too much, given his recovery, or maybe this is the thing they need to see how he responds to playing this amount of matches back to back. So yeah, for me it'll either be, do you go with a frontline spinner, i.e. Dawson, or do you not, and then you're sort of expecting Root to kind of fill that mantle, and then who's Overton potentially going to come in for if you want to change it up, or depending on how they'll report for duty. If no one's sore, no one's carrying any niggles, then maybe you go with what you've done. But I'm sitting on the fence as usual, because the bowling attack has done its job. It's not taken 20 wickets, but it's done all right. So if this is about not losing the test and winning the series, then there'd be an argument to go with what you've got. I like having Dawson in personally. I thought he's done fine. He certainly adds a different dimension to the bowling, to the batting, and also a different lens with his bowling. So I'm not sure how you see it, Binksy, but you've probably got more definitive answer. But don't know.
Yeah, look, I've probably got a more definitive answer. Whether it's the right definitive answer is a different story. Look, I think the Dawson one is an interesting one, because if we look at economy rates and we look at the way that he was able to hold an end for large periods of this Test match, he did allow Stokes to that old cliche, rotate his seamers throughout the course of this Test match. I think if we look at the workloads that the guys have kind of gone through in this series, Chris Wokes, I think, has bowled the most overs of everybody. And then, Carson, Stokes himself actually aren't far behind. I think we've got Josh Tongue, who, impressed over a couple of games, but with, similar concerns around him playing back to back to back. But he's pretty rested now, if you like. And then I think that, the other question mark that they've got Atkinson has gone off and played. And this is a really interesting one. The word on the street is that he was released to go and play back for Surrey, with the message that England didn't want to risk him in this Test match in case he did go ping. Surrey then said, well, if you guys don't want to risk him and that's what your doctors think, why would we risk him in our Surrey Championship game? We'll go and play him in the second 11. So he's gone and played a second 11 game last week. But he comes into contention. And if you want some colours now to the mast, I think where England go is exactly the same top seven. I think that they play Dawson, at number 8, and then Seamers. I'd be asking whether Archer can back up, and if he says I'm ready to go, he would play for me. Tongue would play for me, and then it would be one of Atkinson or Overton, depending on how Atkinson has pulled up. If Atkinson's pulled up all right after that game, I'd be bringing him in. And that's on the proviso that Stokes thinks he can get through a few overs as well. Otherwise, I think you've got some slightly different conversations going on. But ultimately, if I'm going to nail my colours to the mast, my bowling attack is Dawson, Archer, Tongue, Atkinson, and who else did I say? Archer,
With
Tongue,
Stokes.
and Stokes. Yeah. So that's where I would go with that. So obviously,
So you're resting Wokes.
Yeah,
because of
Wokes and
workload.
Carse. Yeah, Wokes and Carse would miss out for me. And I'd be asking if Archer can go around again. And then I'd essentially be bringing in for Wokes and Carse. I'd be bringing in Tong and Atkinson.
Mm.
They won't do that.
They might. They're talking about all those guys being tired. I wouldn't surprise me if those three seamers are all rotated out.
Yeah, I think that I think they're going to need to. Yeah, they're going to need to think about that, and I think that there is a bit more pace and carry historically at the Oval, even in recent history. So I think they're hoping there is a little bit more in it, a little bit more of a baseball pitch, if you will. But I think they like the length of the batting lineup, and particularly if you lose Wokes from that. That batting lineup, and you lose Carse from that batting lineup, who's been really impressive with the bat as well as the ball. I think you need to play. You probably need to play Dawson at number 8 because Tong doesn't offer you quite the same as either Carse or Wokes with the bat. Before we move on and talk New Zealand, South Africa, Zimbabwe. Predictions where it's on a knife edge, isn't it? Raj would be talking about momentum, wouldn't he? And you'd probably say that sits with India, but where do you boys see it?
I'm not entirely sure what the forecast is, if I'm brutally honest.
Forgetting the weather forecast. The weather forecasts are relevant. Just talk about the two teams. If the rain intervenes, then the rain intervenes.
Yeah. come back to difficult one. Yeah, momentum. I'd go with you got to probably go in with India, what they're taking in. By rotating England, run the risk of players trying to find their feet, and in a really important match. If you go with the same, you've got old legs, tired legs. Can they do it? I'm going to stick my neck out and say draw. No, I won't. I'm going to go with England. Yeah, no real basis for that other than I'm English.
I've got no shame in saying I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen in this game. And that's because I think there'll be a lot of changes. I think there'll be a lot of changes to the bowling attacks, punts out, and I just don't know what to make. Like, this has been a back and forth series. It's been a really, really good one. We talked throughout this how it could be 2-1 either way. Even England, you could make an argument that India should have bowled England out in that first test as well. And, India could be well on top in this series. But you could also make the opposite argument that England should be already 3-1 ahead and have this game and have this series in the bag. So, I think anything could happen. I'm not brave enough. I just don't know what's going to happen. I would just be plucking a name out of the hat.
Yeah, I would be as well, but the name I'd pluck out, I think, would be England. I think they want to prove after that Ashes very close series, the moral Ashes, that actually they can get over the line and win that tight series and not have any asterisk on the scoreline. The caveat I would say is I think a lot's going to depend on India. If India go into this and go, we've only said we're going to play our key strike bowler in 3 games and that's what we're going to do. And look, I mean this in the nicest possible way. They therefore care less about it. They're kind of almost going, we've got a longer term plan here. It's not as important for us to take that risk on a guy that's a 3-4 match strike bowler. Then, I think that swings it in England's favour. I think if both teams really go into this and go, right, let's get into that physio room and really sort of see who can go through those pain barriers, then I think it's going to be an absolute humdinger. And weather forecast, looks like there might be a bit of rain around Wednesday and Thursday this week. So might sort of just impact the preparations for that wicket a little bit. And then it looks set fair for the weekend. A bit of rain potentially on the Sunday of the Test match. But who knows? That could change pretty quickly in England. Stu, let's move on. There is some T20 cricket happening, and New Zealand are T20 champions. I'm reliably informed, and your Matt Henry stocks continuing to rise. What do you want to talk about in terms of what's going on with the Black Caps at the moment?
Look, I've got to shoot off to work very, very shortly, so I won't take up too much time. I don't know if the Zimbabwe T20 Tri-Series has made it over to England shores in terms of coverage.
It's not on the TV, mate. No, I don't think.
Here in New Zealand, it was on TV3, or TV3's on-demand service, which is very, very rare in terms of for them to have it on TV. But look, we did get to see it. We did get to see Rob Walters' debut as New Zealand coach in this T20 Tri-Series, unbeaten through pool play, and then sort of come up in the clutch to make it 5 from 5 and secure a piece of silverware. Didn't look like a cup to me. It looked kind of like some sort of trophy, some flat piece of I don't know, glass or metal or something.
A shield.
Some not quite a shield, just some sort of trophy. Anyway, they were holding something. They won their games, and I mean, it's a great game for anyone who wants to go and look at the highlights. It came down to South Africa pretty much being on top throughout their whole second. They were chasing 180. They were on top pretty much the whole way. They're 96 for none. Luandro Pretorius, Baldy and I talked about him last week. He looks like he could be a fun player to watch for South Africa. But, they're 92 for none, off 9.3. They're going along. But New Zealand managed to just keep picking up wickets and got it to 7 off the last over. Matt Henry comes in. And what I found actually was really interesting, you'll see 2 brilliant catches if you go and look at the highlights. Devalt Brevis, second ball, I think, he just looks like he's going to clear the rope, win it with a 6. Michael Bracewell uses some fancy footwork on the boundary, catches it, the step over the rope, throw it back in, that they make look so easy now that they used to appear on highlights packages as, greatest play ever, and now they're just routine. But what Matt Henry sort of talked about in the final over is with 7 to go, he went, okay, well, I have to take more risks, and so I'm not going to bowl any full balls. I'm going to bowl all short, and I'm going to basically say, you're going to hit it in the air. So we're going to either get you out, or you're going to swing and miss, or you're going to hit boundaries and win the game. And he took those risks, executed perfectly, and New Zealand executed perfectly in the field. Daryl Mitchell, they needed 4 off 2. George Linda hits the ball straight down the ground. Looks like it's going for 4. Daryl Mitchell dives and takes an absolute ripper on the straight boundary to catch it. And, then next ball, Henry bowls a slower ball bouncer and a swing and a miss, and they secure the victory. So, really, really positive stuff. I know lots of people will point to the sides in this. New Zealand missing some players, South Africa missing a bunch of their frontline players, but I think a lot of positives around what they're doing. A lot of, me and Baldy talked about it last week. A lot of different names now in the mix, and you could build this New Zealand T20 side out in a lot of different ways. And now we go into a test series against Zimbabwe where some other players are going to get opportunities as well. So it's encouraging for New Zealand. Rob Walter start with 5 wins in a row. You can't do much more than that. So very, very nice to see.
Nice work.
Just quickly on the Zimbabwe Test series, I will say it looks like we will see a very, very settled side. Possibly the bowling attack is the main thing that's up for question, and it could mean to test some test debuts or a test debut for a Jacob Duffy or a Matt Fisher, who's a young player. Well, not that young anymore. I think he's 25 now. Speedster from ND, who's kind of been in the Ben Sears mold, not in the way he actually bowls. They have very different actions, but in someone who's been injured a bit throughout their young career, and but every time he comes in, looks threatening. Has been in the New Zealand A scene for a little while, and now could get his opportunity. Even though there is Henry there, there's O'Rourke, there's Nathan Smith who's had opportunities, and we've got other spin options. So yeah, we'll see what unfolds in terms of how they build that test side, because yeah, they're playing in Bulawayo where, it seemed like South Africa at least was able to pile on a lot of runs in the 2 tests that they played against Zimbabwe.
And Stu, Glenn Phillips withdrawn from that squad. Have they replaced him directly?
Yeah, so Michael Bracewell's come.
Okay.
He's staying on, but then he's only available for the first test because he's off to, is it the 100, or he's off to another, pre-organised T20 series, because obviously he wasn't in the initial squad. So, yeah, interesting to see if he plays again. Someone's going to have to bat 7. I don't know.
Phillips would have played, wouldn't he?
I think so, yeah. Phillips would have definitely played and batted 7, and he provides a bit of bowling options there as well. So, yeah, whether they just say it's like for like, or whether they say, Santner, you're good enough to bat 7, and they go with more of a Nathan Smith at 8 to have a bit more all-round and 3 more quicks. Yeah, it'd probably depend on the pitch, right, in terms of the balance of their side, but they've also got Ravindra. They do have sort of building a decent stock of maybe not frontline all-rounders, but bowlers who can, or batters who can bowl a little bit as well. So, yeah, whether Ajaz that gets a run, lots of different options. So I won't try and guess the lineup, but yeah, it does mean a return for Devon Conway with Kane not being there. Conway will probably open with Latham, and Young might slot down to 3, and then we'll see a similar Ravindra Mitchell Blundell kind of lineup.
Yeah, and this is one of those silly 2 test series, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, 2 test series. Doesn't count for the World Test Championship, obviously, because Zimbabwe's not in it. But yeah. Good to see New Zealand playing test cricket again. And interesting for Zimbabwe. I haven't actually seen this confirmed, but a lot of chat around Brendan Taylor likely to make his return after 3.5 years out, banned, as part of the anti-corruption code. Yeah, I haven't seen it confirmed, but a lot of people saying he will return to the squad at some point in the series now that his ban is up. And I think he's 39 years old now, so we'll see what he can offer if he does return.
Yeah, not in the Cricinfo squad just yet, but yeah, I guess let's keep hitting refresh on that page over the course of the next couple of days.
I know that's what you'll be doing, Binksy.
No, I will. Mate, I'm going to set an AI automation to do it right now. Absolutely. Well, look, yeah, hopefully, over the course of the next week or so, we'll of course be back in your feed to wrap up that Anderson Tendulkar Trophy finale at the Oval. We'll also talk, obviously, a little bit about this New Zealand-Zimbabwe Test match kicking off on the 30th, I think, in Bulawayo. And then, second test following that as well. And then we'll be, I guess, into some one-dayers at the back end of the England season. And then, of course, the Southern Hemisphere kicks off with its cricket, just as everybody else gets to pay $4,000 for the right to purchase their season ticket, Jamie. We won't go into that, will we? Because that might be a sore point. But that is about all we've got time for on this edition of the Top Order podcast. We'll see you soon, wherever you get your podcasts. Good night.